We are joined now from the Columbia Encampment by first-year law student and Columbia undergrad graduate, Safia Southey. Safia, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it. So when I talked to you a couple of days ago, or whenever that was, about coming on to join the show, you were out picking up Seder supplies. Can you tell us a little bit about how Seder went there at the encampment?
Yeah, it was honestly one of the most inspiring experiences I've had, and not a Seder like anything else. We had dozens and dozens of students gathered around on the floor. It was my first outdoor Seder, and it was really beautiful, mostly led by Jewish Voice for Peace here on campus. We had a specialized Haggadah talking about the concepts of liberation, and it was just a very wonderful multicultural moment. Nearly everybody on campus was, or everybody at the camp was there and shared in the moment. So very grateful to have that.
And can you tell us just a little bit about the logistics of the encampment? How many people are there right now? You guys are overnight in tents. How are you getting food? What's your life like? Basically, we get a good, I think, visual of it, which we appreciate a lot. But what's your life like right now in the encampment?
Yeah, so after the first encampment was kind of dismembered on Wednesday, a bunch of students jumped over to the West Lawn of Columbia, and we've been here since Thursday. So students are here overnight. At the very beginning, we weren't allowed to have tents, so we were sleeping on the ground, on tarps in the rain, which was not very fun. We now have tents, which is wonderful. We have probably about 50 students here right now. There was supposed to be a police raid at 8 a.m. this morning, so we have fewer students than we usually do. Usually there's about 200. A lot of them sleeping over here. We have food from donations, and so it's been a really wonderful experience to watch people come in. There's a system of runners who come and collect food from all over, and we have a food table abundance, and we have water supplies, a lot of students taking care of us. It's a very community-driven place where everybody just kind of chips in whatever they can in terms of like labor and support.
Yeah. And so President Biden recently called the protest that you're a part of flatly anti-Semitic. The Secretary of Education said that he's launching a Title, was it 9? What's the title? Whatever title they're using to investigate Columbia, basically for anti-Semitism. What was your reaction? What was your reaction in the camp to that national attention and to that allegation?
Yeah, I am really disappointed and horrified at that idea. I mean, I'm a Jewish student here. We have a huge number of Jewish students who, we have the Shabbat service and a Havdalah service, and obviously a huge Seder. It's part of our strict Columbia, community guidelines here in the encampment, that we accept everybody if they're here and in support of the cause. There have been anti-Semitic incidents that have happened outside of the campus gates, usually by individuals or groups that are not aligned with the people who have organized the encampment, or at least the message is not aligned. And so while I do understand why some Jewish students on campus feel threatened in some capacity, the bumping that in with the encampment I find to be really disheartening, given the fact that this is such a accepting place that has welcomed me and everybody else. And honestly, I find that the protests and the anti-Semitic comments and the focus on that has been a complete distraction from why we are here and the actual message of divestment and transparency and support for Palestinian people that this camp stands for, especially because it is such a welcoming environment that I am very grateful to be a part of.
Yeah, I think it's important that you acknowledged some of the stuff that's been, as you say, off message, because, there was that Al-Qassam's next target sign that was horrific. But free speech is, there was also the one that said, let it be known. That was the Al-Aqsa flood that put the global intifada back on the table again, a speaker. Yeah. So that stuff is it's important, though, to support free speech when it's really hard. And I guess I would just say, probably some of your fellow Jewish students on campus who are on the other side of this might say, are you guys cracking down hard enough on those people who are off message? What would you say to that? What would you say to them if they were in front of you and said, you should be cracking down harder on the people who are veering off message. I imagine you've done some of that.
Yeah, I will say that it's hard to crack down on people when they are individuals and physically outside the bounds of the school. So we are all in this inner space, and a lot of the idea is like taking up the space on campus. And so the idea of like going outside and policing individual people for messages is firstly impossible. Second of all, UAD, the divestment group, along with the other organizing groups, have actively tried to address and go against the idea of anti-Semitism, asking groups outside to stop using this kind of rhetoric. The girl with the Al-Aqsa sign was not a Columbia student. We have no idea how she got here. I have not known of a single incident of a Columbia student or somebody in the encampment using such language. And so while there has been an active effort to kind of quash this kind of rhetoric, it's very, very, very difficult. Somebody's coming and recording. And so it happens quite often here. So yeah, so we have been trying to also like tell Jewish students that they're welcome to come with the like seders and services and things like that. We are trying to make this as welcoming a space as possible, and ask those groups to really make sure that they are acting in line with the overall message without it being a distraction to what we're here standing for.
One of the big controversies nationally, and Piers Morgan played a role in this, but even without Piers Morgan, I think you still would have had this quote unquote stabbed in the eye controversy that went around. If we could play E4 here, just put this VO up. A student who turns out to be kind of a right-wing provocateur. She had previously gone viral like a year or two ago, complaining about Israeli couscous. So that's the flag incidents that you guys just saw. It's basically a toy little flag that the person is waving as they're walking through. The alleged victim said that she had been stabbed in the eye and sent fear kind of coursing through Jewish communities around the country. That the video emerged finally last night, showing that if she was hit at all, it was a grazing by a kind of rounded ball at the end of a toy flag, and that clearly, because she's been on television, clearly did no damage. I'm curious what the encampment felt when they initially heard that story, and also, yes, to Emily's point, what are you guys doing to try to control the message and control the narrative? Because now this has become a kind of international spectacle that is a kind of a competition for the narrative.
Yeah, I think that there is a sense of horror, firstly, at the idea of somebody who was kind of on our side, quote unquote, perpetrating such behavior, but also the idea that incidents get blown out of proportion is not rare. We have a lot of students who are counter-protesters who try to come in, who try to film our faces and change the narrative a lot or take things out of context. We have strict policies here not to interact with counter-protesters because we understand that pretty much anything that we do will often be misconstrued or taken out of context. And so, I mean, our main policy is to not encourage that, not give anybody any fuel, but then also to really not address it for the most part. I think that we try to work to show it with our actions rather than trying to control a certain message, which we have found to be inadequate or futile for the most part. There's so many people that every single thing we say will get used in some capacity. And we do have a lot of instigators here who try to come, who try to video us and change the narrative. And so all we can do is kind of take a step back and hope that the actual message gets through.
And you have House Speaker Mike Johnson coming to Columbia today. One of the things I want to ask, I'm sort of fascinated by, on the one hand, you have people on the right saying Columbia has been too permissive of the encampment, too permissive of the rabble-rousers. On the other hand, the left says Columbia has been, and this may be your perspective too, the left has been cracked down on by the university disproportionately. Tell us a little bit about what your interactions with the university have been like, what your perspective is on how they've handled the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, my experience of joining the encampment was specifically in reaction to watching the students get arrested and watching the swarm of NYPD officers in riot gear come and forcibly extract a couple dozen students from genuinely peacefully protesting. So I find that a large part of this now has been this idea of free speech and the ability to protest on campus. And this area of campus lawn has been designated by Columbia as a free speech zone. And as we see with the legacy of Vietnam protests, the idea that within 30 hours, the administration came and forcibly removed people with NYPD officers was just a horrific incident. And then in light of that, I believe that the administration has been scared to act in any way. And especially after the huge backlash and international movement that those arrests largely inspired, it's been interesting to see their response. So at first, through the course of negotiations that organizers have had, there has been a lot of mixed messages from them, a lot of lack of clarity in terms of the administration. They have given us mixed messages and false promises regarding tents, police presence, how long we can be out here. We were informed last night at 10:30 that there was a threat of the National Guard coming, that President Shafiq actually threatened to send in the National Guard, which is horrific.
And who did she threaten that to directly? Are there kind of student negotiators, or?
That was sent to, I believe, administration, or like that was through faculty that then told us afterwards. However, we were sent a threatening letter saying that she had a midnight deadline, and that if that was for negotiations and if there was no agreement met, that she would take further action. So there was a lot of talk. There was supposed to be a police raid last night, and then she decided to change the deadline until 8 a.m. today. So we believe that there is going to be a huge police raid at 8 a.m. today. And then as of this morning, she has changed the deadline to a further 48 hours. So it's been tiring and tedious, and the administration has been consistently arguing in bad faith. There's been no communication with faculty as in how to handle it. So the faculty are completely in the dark about what to do or how to manage things with their students, how to manage student safety. So there's been such just a sense of confusion, both in what's happening and trying to both protect the students and protect the right of free speech here on campus. They're somehow not doing any of it, which is just incredibly disappointing and disheartening to see from our administration, especially from a new president.
And so in mid-February, the Shirian Collective, and if we could put up, I think it's F3 here, put up this crazy job posting where one of the things they said they were looking for were infiltrators. I can read from it here. They said they're looking for, quote, individuals with Arabic-sounding names and Middle Eastern appearance may be uniquely positioned for deeper infiltration and will receive cash compensation for their vital role in our operation. One of the cities they said they were looking to hire in was New York City. The organization, some of their internal messages were leaked later. It said that they actually hoped that they were just going to spark a lot of paranoia, and that they might not even need to go forward, with this operation. That just publicly posting for these job offerings would be enough to kind of tear protest groups in half, with everybody pointing at each other as infiltrators. I'm curious what the level of paranoia is, although at the same time, calling it paranoia is not quite fair, because we know throughout history there have been kind of provocateurs and infiltrators who have come in to try to shout, make an organization look bad. So how is the encampment handling that particular dynamic?
There is a fear of infiltrators. We try to be on the lookout. There's a lot of security around this perimeter and people that have now been trained to kind of see, to suss out people, for lack of a better word. And it's pretty much impossible. So we can have people come in. We have very strict community guidelines that we try to follow. And so when people violate those community guidelines, like filming people's faces, which has, like, students have already started to be doxxed and exposed for their involvement in any way. So as soon as we see things like people filming, we can kind of say, please leave. There have been instances of us having to actively ask people to leave because they were trying to instigate. It's impossible to see who's trying to infiltrate and who's not. However, we have alerts, kind of like when we know that things are higher, when there's things that are less disorganized, like last night in the midst of thinking there was going to be a police raid, we were noting that it's a specific time that would be very feasible for quote, infiltrators to come in. So there is a level of paranoia. There is a level of fear. However, everybody here kind of knows that there's a chance of being doxxed, of being exposed, of being arrested or suspended. And so there's only so much that we can do to prevent it. And the only idea is that we can't be scared. We already know that the administration is threatening us enough. And so the possibility of infiltrators is surely not enough to kind of change anything here.
And while I've got you, and I don't want to put you on the spot too much as a kind of spokesperson for the entire kind of movement, but here's my old man complaint as somebody who covered Occupy Wall Street. The so-called people's mic, and so for people who don't know, the people's mic is what protests have developed when the police say you can't use AV, and you've got to be able to reach people in the back. So somebody will say something, and then the entire crowd kind of repeats it back. And when you're in the middle of it, it can be this production of solidarity and really a moving experience. When you're outside of it, it just looks so creepy and weird. I'm like, the people's mic, I'm like, God, the people's mic has got to go. There's got to be something else. But I'm curious for how you feel about the people's mic, and if there's any other solution. Because once it becomes a contest for public ideas and the public narrative, it winds up undermining it by just kind of looking weird.
Yes, there was an incident of this a few days ago in a video that started being put around where some instigators tried to come onto campus, come into the encampment, and we asked them to leave. There was a lot of people mic, and then people started singing spirituals, which in the moment made me cry. It was a gorgeous moment, and everybody was in solidarity singing together. Watched a video of that later. It looked like a horror movie, and I understand that. So I think it's a really difficult line to draw because we need people's mic in order to communicate. There's not a lot of capacity as long as the school is not allowing us to use any amplification. But I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I've seen those videos. I think it's, again, that kind of line between worrying too much about the media and then having to change organizing tactics in a way to make it yet less useful and less organized, and making it so people can't communicate. So again, I think that there's a sense of priorities, and a lot of this entire encampment has been trying to figure out what the priorities are. We have finals coming up. People think that this is more important. We understand we can look like a horror movie when using people's mic, but again, we have to do whatever it takes to make sure people are united, even if it gets misconstrued, because as I said before, truly everything is getting misconstrued in a way that's supporting the other side.
I guess last question for you: How are people handling the professional threats? You have senators, members of Congress, billionaires saying we need to we're going to have facial recognition technology that's going to identify all of these Hamas supporters, and we're going to make sure that they're never employed ever again. Obviously, these are successful students who've made it to Columbia undergrad or Columbia graduate school, and so that must be something that weighs on them at some level, getting smeared like that. on the other hand, you're facing this moment of intense moral clarity, witnessing a genocide unfold. How are people grappling with that tension?
We try to be really careful of privacy. So privacy is one of the #1 concerns at the encampment. So we always have masks on hand. We always kind of have different levels of privacy for different people. We have the groups of people who are willing to be arrested, and then those who don't want such level of attention. We have no photographs of people's faces. We have really strict rules with the media who come here and what they can and cannot do. We understand that this is such a huge concern for a lot of people who have put their life on the line for this. And a lot of what is most useful is the bodies just here and occupying the space, and who these people are. We try to keep that protected as much as possible. I am in a very lucky position where my hopefully future employers would never cared if I am identified with this, but a lot of people really do care. And a lot of people are putting their friendships, their family relationships on the line. And while we could do whatever we can, again, I think people have assumed this sense of risk coming here and know what may happen. But in the interim, we're trying everything that we possibly can to protect people and also to prevent people from coming in, infiltrators, and using that opportunity to expose us, which is really all that they're able to do at this point.
You know, I was just going to say, I had a funny thought while you were talking, just having worked with so many conservative college students in the last decade, there's something so similar. And there is obviously hypocrisy, but there's just something so similar about students exercising important rights on campus, engaging in free expression, having challenging conversations, and getting targeted for it. And we just have to be consistent when it's hardest. And I think that's, you know, it's when students are within the bounds and outside of, you know, they're not being bigoted, they're not, you know, being violent or inciting anything. We should be cool, like we should be happy to see this happen on college campuses.
Yeah, and college campuses advertise that they are places where this kind of thing can happen. I guess. And the last question for you. What have you said and what would you say to other Jewish students who say that they can't be safe at these protests?
I would say that I understand the fear, and I understand that a lot of the rhetoric can feel really personal. I think that there's a huge distinction between being critical of Israel and being critical of the Jewish people. And that is a distinction that I believe that all the Jews here understand. And that I believe that it's honestly more anti-Semitic to conflate those two. So a lot of the fears that people have are those. I do understand that there are sometimes personal attacks that are outside of the context of Israel. However, I would just try to tell Jewish students that this is not about religion. This is not about personal identities. This is about holding the school accountable and making sure we know where our tuition money is going, making sure we have a say in that, and honestly just championing the solidarity with people in Gaza who are currently being murdered. And that is the issue first and foremost, besides, and the identities of individual people here or Jewish students on campus and elsewhere is so almost irrelevant to what we are trying. And this has been such a honestly inspiring, encouraging experience for me as a Jewish student who has faced absolutely no forms of anti-Semitism here, that I really would encourage students to look at it in that lens and know that they are safe, at least in this encampment and in these spaces.
Well, Safia Southey, first-year law student at Columbia University, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with the ongoing protest.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.